So this week, Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez announced that he expects his country to formally recognise Palestine as an independent country by the summer. Now, he aims also to reach a two-state solution as quickly as possible, and he is set to embark on a tour of Norway, Ireland, Belgium and Slovenia in a bid to drum up support and backing for recognition. Currently, Sweden, Malta, Cyprus, Czechia, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania and Bulgaria recognise Palestine out of EU member states. Now, personally, I favour recognition of Palestine and a two-state solution, but I do find Spain's stance a little bit contradictory. Spain, as we've discussed in previous episodes of Inside Albania, does not recognise Kosovo's independence, and it has also said it will not. Now, it did confirm in January that they will recognise the passport, they will allow visa-free travel to Spain for Kosovo citizens, but officials have reiterated that official recognition of the country is not on the cards. Now, I'm joined today by a former guest, the UK's former Minister for Europe, Denis MacShane. Denis, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you back on Inside Albania.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Now, let's get straight to it. Now, you've written this op-ed and you have some quite strong views, quite rightly so, on Spain's very noble push to recognise Palestine, and yet it's not recognising Kosovo. Now, you note quite rightly that the UK recognises Kosovo without it having any impact on Scottish independence bids, or Welsh, I have to say, being half Welsh myself. Canada recognises Kosovo without it impacting the situation with Quebec secessionists. The same with France and Corsica, Italy, Sardinia. We could say Belgium and Flanders, or Wallonia, Croatia and Istria. I could go on. What is Spain's excuse now?
It doesn't really have one. The problem is the division in Spain is about the constitutional reality of Spain, and the independentistas, as they're called in Catalonia, are seen as almost enemies of the idea of Spain staying together, but in a very direct way, because Spain still, in its recent living history, was ruled by a fascist military dictator. He made a huge point of utterly suppressing anything that smacked of Catalonia, Catalan or Basque identity, the language, newspapers, teaching, just as Serbs tried to crush the idea of teaching in Albanian, Kosovo, in Kosovo. So it is more sensitive, but it's also deeply irrational. And what happens always is, whichever party is in power, if it hints at a reasonable approach to Kosovo, the other one jumps up and says, you're betraying the identity and unity of Spain. But the Kosovo is, in my view, not done enough to educate the Spanish. It's an investment. You have to find some international help just to try and persuade influencers and decision makers that recognizing Kosovo, opening an embassy in Pristina, is not the same as saying Catalonia and the Basque country are going to disappear off to become separate nations.
This is what I don't understand. How can you say we want Palestine to be recognised as an independent state, which I agree with, but then in the same breath say, no, we're never going to recognise Kosovo? Like, how can they contradict each other like that? Is it a contradiction? Or am I missing something?
It is a contradiction. They don't see it that way. Their argument will be, and I've had this argument again and again, and it just doesn't change much, that Kosovo was taken from Serbia thanks to superior military force, the intervention just about 25 years ago, March, I think the 25th, 1999, and that was a military intervention and therefore was illegitimate. It wasn't fully sanctioned by the UN. The UN had passed resolutions to stop the butchery in Kosovo, the Serb mass murders that we all know about. But there wasn't a UN vote because Russia would have vetoed it, China would have vetoed it, to, as it were, create a new state of Kosovo. And lucky Israel in 1948, the UN said you can be a state, though the Israelis have gone a lot further than what was permitted by the UN.
That's one way of putting it.
I was there at the time, and it was announced, Hashim Thachi, I think, was then the prime minister. It was announced with great pomp in America, again, very much with the United States pushing it and other European countries coming along behind, including the United Kingdom. We were strong supporters. But they hadn't really checked with all the European countries. And I remember watching television. A friend of mine who was a Spanish foreign minister, and Spain that Sunday, literally in the same week or two, Kosovo declared independence, was going into the toughest election that they'd faced for some years. And this chap came out and said Spain will never recognize Kosovo's independence, because if he'd said the opposite, he was a socialist, then the right wing party in Spain would have jumped down his throat and won many more votes. And that really is the problem. It's impossible to line up all 27 European countries, of course. But I've constantly argued that the guys in Pristina with their helpers in Washington don't pay enough attention to European politics and changing the mentality in the European capitals.
Now, when I was, mentally struggling with understanding this, and I thought maybe if Spain recognizes Palestine and they can recognize Palestine without it impacting their view of Catalonia and everything, could that be a precedent in Spain for them to then recognize Kosovo? I thought, are they playing a game here? What do you think?
Well, it obviously is a precedent when you recognize a country that doesn't actually control a state or have a democratically elected parliament, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, we all emotionally support the idea of a state of Palestine, but strictly speaking, in international law, you recognize states that have got an agreed frontier and have legal jurisprudence over that country. Doesn't necessarily have to be a democracy, but there is an acceptance of borders, and that country is ruled by the government there. Now, that's not the case.
No.
The occupied West Bank, we don't have to go into Israel details. We all know them by heart. So recognizing Palestine is more in the territory of diplomatic gestures, but nonetheless, it is international law. It is a significant step forward. I agree with Pedro Sanchez. I think that is a good decision by Spain. Were I a Spaniard, I would be supporting him. And I just hope somebody realizes that Spain could be a much bigger player in Europe if it was lined up with the big European players, namely in the EU, Germany, France, Italy, Netherlands, and all Poland. In the broader Europe, have to sort of have a small word for the UK, even if we're not in the EU. We are in NATO. We're in lots of other. I'm going to the Council of Europe next week, where there'll be a very important debate on Kosovo joining the Council of Europe. And indeed, that would be Spain then would have far more pull. But Spain is absent in the whole of the West Balkans. It's not just Kosovo. The West Balkans remains Europe's Achilles heel. I mean, it's, if you like, 25 years since Milosevic and Tudjman launched the great wars that devoured the West Balkans, ending up in 1999 with the liberation of Kosovo. We all know that history, but very few Europeans do. I do think Kosovo should spend more time on just educating the rest of Europe into its existence. In fact, there are a lot of tensions. Yes, there are problems with the Serbs in the north, but there are plenty of cities and towns and communities where the Serbs live peacefully side by side. Third, Orthodox religion, especially in Peć, is fully respected and admired, and the best beer in Kosovo is brewed there, in my humble opinion. And so it is time just to let Kosovo be Kosovo. It'll be imperfect. There'll be tensions. There'll be accusations of corruption. People hate Kurti. Other people don't like the war parties. Yes. Welcome to European politics. That happens in every country.
Now, my last question. We are both in Strasbourg next week. I hope we get to meet in person. There is a very important resolution vote coming up to do with Kosovo in the Council of Europe plenary around the 75th anniversary of the body's establishment. What do you expect to come out from next week?
Well, big fingers crossed. I mean, I did urge Kosovo to lobby very hard in the Council of Europe. It's done so, I think, with support of Britain, certainly, but other countries too. There's a very strong statement by Frank Schwabe, who is the German Social Democrat. He is chairman of the socialist group of delegates, parliamentarians of the Council of Europe, 2 3 weeks ago, urging everybody to support the resolution accepting Kosovo as a Council of Europe member. I'm not picking up rumours against. Obviously, the Serbs have said, Vucic has said, "I'll walk out of the Council of Europe." Well, goodbye, Alex. You can go enjoy.
It's not an
Mr.
airport. You don't
Putin.
have to announce your departure.
You can go and join Mr. Putin, Mr. Lukashenko. If you really think that does Serbia any good at all, be my guest.
Yes.
So, but we'll see. I mean, there will be the Greeks, obviously the Spanish. I'm not sure the non-recognisers in the EU, because the Council of Europe is bigger than the EU. It's got way in Switzerland and indeed had Russia in it and all the Balkan states. So I do hope that finally Kosovo will be admitted and can take a full part in the Council of Europe's work and deliberations.
I hope so too. I did read something actually. The German representative of the Council of Europe had said something, Kosovo should establish the Association of Serb Municipalities before we could, but I'm not convinced that that's going to pick up enough traction to derail.
Well, I mean, again, I've talked to people on that. I mean, Mr. Kurti's got a very strong position. He thinks that would be a bit like Republika Srpska in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Be serious. I mean, the Serbs are a very significant part of the population of Bosnia-Herzegovina. In Kosovo, they're a minority, a small group. I mean, important, but they can play a full part in Kosovo. I'm not sure that establishing, I know that makes people in Pristina nervous. Frankly, if they wanted to create a association of Irish municipalities in England or Scottish-run municipalities in England, we wouldn't worry, but we've been around for 200 or 300 years with a more stable democracy, so we're not too don't get too up about that. So everybody agrees, I think, that Mr. Kurti's position, for which I have some sympathy. He is a very principled man, very intellectual man, and he has been elected by the people of Kosovo, so he has to speak for them and for what he himself believes in. Alice, I hope, as a former delegate to the Council of Europe, a big supporter of the Council of Europe, that this time next week we can celebrate Kosovo joining.
I hope so too. Your words are very correct. I couldn't have said it better myself. Good luck to Kosovo next week, and I'll see you in Strasbourg.
See you in Strasbourg.
Thank you.